directors on with us this evening. So tonight we'll be talking about, next slide, please. Tonight we'll be talking about how you nominate the people who are running for office, running for your nominating committee, how you host the election for the nominating committee, how you nominate your officers, and how you elect those officers. Everything that you need will be found in your bylaws, which dictate how to nominate and elect your board. This session is to help you interpret your bylaws regarding those two areas. We're sure that you will have a good time tonight. If you lean in, have some fun, play along. If your name gets called, just say sure. All right, take it away, gentlemen.
So again, good evening to everyone. And as Carolyn mentioned, your bylaws are really going to lead the way that you handle this process as it relates to your nominations and so forth. One of the most important articles in those bylaws is Article 6, that speaks to the officers of the association and their election. In Section 1, in a nutshell, kind of goes over the fact that each officer of the association must be a member of your respective PTA or PTSA. I've had questions in the past where someone says, oh, but they're a member over at ABC Elementary. Do they have to be a member at the middle school? If they are going to serve at the middle school, they need to be a member of that PTA. Section 2 speaks directly to the officers and their elections, outlines who the officers of the association are and when they shall be elected. Specifically, the month in which the officers will be elected, which is during the annual meeting of your PTA. Section 3 talks to you a little bit about the makeup of the nominating committee. In the current template, you have the option to elect either 3 or 5 members of the nominating committee. And again, that is electing members to the nominating committee, which is handled during a general meeting, elected by the general body. All righty. Section 4 of Article 6 speaks to vacancies and how you would handle vacancies when they occur in your elected offices. Section 5 speaks to being a member for 30 days prior to voting in the annual meeting. Now, we'll cover it a little bit more later, but this is not to be confused with the requisite that you must be a member 30 days prior in order to serve as an officer for your PTA. And of course, Section 6 speaks to the term of service, specifically the length of the term, options for a second term, and then of course, the requirement that you not serve more than 2 years in any respective office. Toss it over to Lawrence.
Right, electing your nominating committee, and this is in Section 3A, of the bylaws. Now, your nominating committee must consist of at least 3, and in your bylaws currently, it will say 3 or 5 members, and it's always going to be an uneven number. The nominating committee is elected by the association at a regular meeting held at least 1 month prior to the election of officers. And once the officers, or should I say the nominating committee members, are determined, the president then appoints what we call a chair pro tem, basically a temporary chair, to call the first meeting at which the chair of the nominating committee will then be elected by the members of the nominating committee. Next slide. Now, the purpose of the nominating committee is to, elect or select, officer candidates, a slate of candidates for the positions. Now, the committee nominates 1 person for each office, and it is recommended that you check your bylaws because everybody's bylaws are different depending on the number of vice presidents or corresponding secretary. This to ensure that they know which positions they are selecting candidates for. Reports, the nominating committee then reports out, at the election of the meeting where they're reporting out the slate of candidates. During that meeting, additional nominations may be made from the floor, and you must be a PTA member of the PTA to be nominated. And in the section 3C, there has to be consent to serve if nominated for or elected to office. You can't simply say, hey, John, we want to recommend John for the position of president, but John's not there. And then John hasn't said, yes, I'd like to run for that position. They must, consent to be nominated for that position. And then members of the nominating committee can be elected to office. As with anything PTA, we don't want to exclude folks from, what they do. So do not be afraid to raise your hand to be a nominating committee member, because you are electing the folks that are going to help grow your association going forward. Alvin?
So let's talk a little bit about actually electing your officers. So again, in your bylaws, depending on how old your local unit bylaws are, because the new template does not actually leave a space for the number of vice presidents. If you have a space that identifies a number of vice presidents, that simply means it's time for you to review your bylaws and have them reapproved by Florida PTA. However, in Section 2A, Section 2A outlines who those officers are. It's a president, vice presidents, recording secretary, corresponding secretary, and treasurer. Now, the stipulation is there that all officers shall be elected by ballot annually in the month of, and in your bylaws, it will stipulate when that month is. That month also coincides with another space in the bylaws that calls for your annual meeting. So that is during the annual meeting of your PTA or PTSA. Of course, when there's but one nominee for any office, vote for that particular position, or the slate, if there's only one person per position, can be by voice or show of membership card or delegate card. It is important to keep in mind that during your elections, a majority vote will elect your officers. Now, over the years, we've had a number of questions as it relates to when people actually take office. When do they assume their duties? Well, according to your bylaws, you will assume your duties at the end of the school year. So if your school year ends on June 4th, that means June 5th, congratulations, you are it. You are ready to go. Now, one of those things, in order to ensure that you're ready to go on the day that you assume your duties, after the election meeting, it's important for those officers that may be retiring to meet with those that will be assuming office so that they can ensure a proper transition of the two respective executive committees. Now, you will serve a term of 1 year or until a successor is elected. Keep in mind that during the early days of COVID, this was something that really came into play as it related to when someone's term ended. There was some overlap where people simply carried over to the next year because we were not able to have election meetings. However, stipulations as it relates to meetings has been relaxed, and you are able to have virtual meetings. Therefore, you probably won't run into this unless you simply have not been able to elect someone. Now, it's important to note that in the office of treasurer, the treasurer does not assume his or her duties until after the books have been audited. So once the retiring treasurer has provided the books to the audit committee and the audit committee has completed their work, the treasurer will not assume their duties until after the books have been properly audited. Section 2D stipulates, again, something that we have said over and over again. No member is eligible to serve more than 2 consecutive terms in the same office. So case in point, if Miss Mary has been president for 2 years, well, Miss Mary, although she is committed to service of PTA, will need to find another role in which she desires to serve. So she may decide that she'd like to be a vice president for a year. After that 1 year as a vice president, or at least half the term, she could then be eligible to serve again as president if she wanted to at the next election. So that's extremely important that you keep that in mind. Alrighty, so let's talk a little bit about vacancies. Fact of the matter is this is in your bylaws because we know that these things happen. So in the office, specifically the office of president, anytime that there is a vacancy in the office of president, it shall be filled for the remainder of that unexpired term by the vice president. Okay, so if you are a member of a PTA that has 1 vice president, if there's a vacancy in the office of president, the vice president automatically becomes president. Now, if for some reason there's some hesitation and you decide that you not like to serve as president, we thank you for your service, but when you resign as president, you've now vacated a presidency and a vice presidency, okay? Because you automatically ascend to the office of president. Now, in the case of any other offices, anytime that there is a vacancy, a majority vote of the current executive board will fill that position. Keep in mind that your executive board consists of all elected officers, your principal or their designee, and the chairs of any standing committees. Again, that is the elected officers, the principal and or their designee, and the chairs of any standing committees. Now, it is a good practice to provide as much notice to the executive board that you will be electing someone to fill a vacancy in advance. That also provides an opportunity, if there is no one on the board, for instance, that may be interested in that position, to solicit the membership for someone that is willing to volunteer and dedicate time to that position. Specific to dues, any member who has not been a member for 30 days prior to the annual meeting is not allowed to vote in the annual election of officers. Sometimes that is confused with the fact that maybe someone had not been a member for 30 days prior, and they felt, and it's been misconstrued that that person cannot be elected. In fact, it is possible for you to walk into your very first PTA meeting, not be a member, and before you leave there, not only do you have work, but you've been elected as an officer. Because if you join that night and are nominated and elected, thank you very much. Let's roll on, okay? So again, the requirement is 30 days prior to the annual meeting to be a member in order to vote in the annual election of officers. Now, the term of service, again, we've shared before, is 1 year with the option to be elected to a second 1-year term, not, of course, spending more than 2 consecutive years in any position. All righty, we're going to kick it over to Carolyn.
Talking to myself. Thank you, Alvin. Thank you, Lawrence. I want to go over just a couple of things that Lawrence and Alvin have already mentioned to you. First, for any meeting, you have to make sure you have a quorum. That information can be found also in your bylaws. It's actually in Article 8, Section 4. The minimum number of members for a quorum for any PTA meeting is 10, unless your local unit has raised that number. You can raise it, but you can't lower it. Minimum number of members is 10. And since this is a learning opportunity, is there anyone that doesn't understand what a quorum is? Now's the time. Please don't be afraid to ask any questions that you have. Everybody's comfortable with the word quorum. That's the minimum number of members that you need to have in order to conduct business. Okay? You have to have a secretary there in order to take minutes. The secretary at your election meeting will also read the election provision from your bylaws. There's a large section in your bylaws that talks about the election of officers. As a part of the meeting agenda, the president will call on the secretary to read that particular part. The president chairs the election meeting, even if the president is nominated for office or chooses to run from the floor that very night. The president still chairs the meeting. The president should have a script prepared, an election meeting script. The same thing for your nominating meeting where the nominating committee is elected. Have a script. It helps you to follow through everything that you need to do to make sure that things are done decently and in order. If you don't have a nominating script, a script for your nominating meeting or a script for your election meeting, please reach out to your county council president. If you don't hear back from your county council president, you always have Bert Miller, vice president for regions and councils. And of course, you have the entire executive committee here at your disposal to give you a hand. We want to make sure that your meetings are run in order and that there are no hiccups. Does everyone know what a teller is during the meeting? This is the quiet crowd. Nobody has their cameras on and they're all quiet.
No,
I do not know what a teller is. This is Allison.
I
Thank
don't.
you.
I don't either. I'm Lindsay.
Thank you. Hi, Lindsay and Allison. Thank you. A teller tellers are the people that the president generally pre-selects to pass out ballots, collect the ballots, and then count them in a designated area away from the meeting. Tellers are the people who do the counts, and they come back in. The head teller, who the president also appoints, will come back in and provide a report simply stating the number of votes that each member who is running for office has received. The teller does not declare anyone elected. They simply state the number of votes that each member has received. Ballots. Have ballots ready. A ballot can be as simple as a piece of paper that you hand out to those people who are qualified to vote that evening or afternoon. The ballots should all be identical. So if you're going to use a piece of 3x5 paper, everybody gets the same 3x5 paper, same color, same size. No, if one has lines, they all have to have lines. If one of them doesn't have lines, they all must be the same. Have ballots ready and have extra ballots ready in the event of a tie, because that could happen. And what happens if you have 2 ties, 3 ties, 4 ties? Well, you keep voting, or hopefully someone understands that you'll be there for a very long time and they say, okay, I give up. All right, but you keep voting in order to break a tie. If you followed all of these things, you have your quorum. To have the secretary ready to do what the secretaries do is take minutes and read the election provisions. If the chair is there and you have a script to follow, your tellers are ready and your ballots are ready, most likely you're ready to host your election meeting. Now let's take a quick look at a schedule for making sure you have your nominating committee and your election on time. In either September, October, or November, it's recommended that you elect your nominating committee. Don't panic. If you haven't done that already, you can do that in January when you have your next meeting. Generally, in January, local units host a general meeting in order to review and make changes to their budget. While we're talking about your budget, let's talk about a couple of things that we need to make sure are included in your budget. If you're planning to attend the 2023 Leadership Convention, that is a legitimate expense that should be a line item in your budget. It should include registration, travel, and meals. Your policies and procedures or standing rules should outline who your local unit sends to Leadership Convention. It is the best event you will ever attend. You get to network, you get to learn, and you get to have a really good time. So make sure you have a line item in your budget during that January meeting if you have to, that covers leadership convention. There are also another couple of items that you should have line items for in case you'd like to participate. In April of 2023, specifically on April 14th, Florida PTA will turn 100 years old. We're going to celebrate that fact on April 15th in the Orlando area. Tickets will go on sale soon, and that too is a legitimate expense to be included in your budget, both the ticket and the travel, if your local unit chooses to participate. You can also make a donation to Florida PTA, and that can be in your budget. There are donation levels for everyone to be able to participate, whether as an individual or local unit, starting at 1923, which is the year that we were born, all the way up to whatever you'd like to give us. Feel free to just dig in deep and share with Florida PTA. Lastly, on May 6th, all the parents are going to be able to do this one. We're going to host our first face-to-face reflections event since 2019. That's a long time. It's been a long time since we've had an opportunity to celebrate the artistic talents of our children, and we're looking forward to it. I know that you are too. Our children deserve the applause that they will receive. So make sure that you amend your budget in January and elect, not select, not appoint, elect your nominating committee. Alvin shared with you that that is an elected position. It's not appointed by the president. It's not appointed by the principal. It's elected by the general membership. Come March or April, it's time to announce the slate of officers. Your nominating committee should put out a form that says, we're looking for officers. Are you interested? They may ask for a resume. They just may ask for names. But whatever they do, after the cutoff date, the nominating committee gets together and they talk about who are the best candidates based on qualification to fill the roles at your local unit. Once that is done, they're able to announce who the slate of officers are. Then, in accordance with your bylaws, where it states when your annual meeting is being held, whether it's in April or May, you have that election meeting to elect your new officers. They will take office, again in accordance with your bylaws, at the end of the school year. Now, for those of you who registered and clicked on that link and read the description about this meeting, we said we're going to have some fun, and this is going to be interactive. Here's where we're going to have a mock election meeting, because we've already had our nominating election, and we have already had the meeting where we elected our nominating committee. At this meeting, we're going to host our election. So I know that I picked on a few people who are on here earlier, and they came back to be tortured again, but I won't torture the same people. Let's see who I'm going to have. Alvin, will you be our head teller?
Certainly.
Lawrence, will you be the chair of the nominating committee?
Now,
All right, so we need a secretary. I see Matthew is sitting down. Matthew, will you serve as secretary for this meeting?
Sure.
Okay, so get ready to take some notes. All right. Mary, we'll get to the questions in just a little while. Thank you for your question. Okay, so good evening, everyone. My name is Carolyn Nelson Goddard. I am the president of Road to Success PTA. Welcome to our annual meeting where we'll be electing the officers for the next school year. I hope that you're all excited about this. So we'll do our pledge, we'll do our meditation. The secretary will call the roll of officers, see who is here, and we will declare that we have a quorum. That is extremely important. You must have a quorum at this meeting, and it must be reflected in the minutes. All right. If there is no objection, and this is a motion by general consent, If there is no objection, we will attend to our special orders. An election is a special order prior to continuing with the rest of our meeting. Hearing no objection, we will attend to our special orders. Yes, Matthew.
Just a question for if I was a secretary, do we have to announce whether or not, do we have to collect names for people voting? Should we have a way to account for how many people are present?
That's a great question. So when people are coming into your meeting, you should have a list of paid members and the dates that they joined, because that will cover what Alvin said a little bit earlier. They have to have been a member for 30 days. When they come in, you can also do one of two things. You can have a strip of colored paper, for instance, an 8.5 by 11 paper that you have cut into 4 or 5 strips that will only be given to those people who are eligible voters. That will be considered their voting delegate card. If you've been to leadership convention, you know that you actually get a card. But at your local unit meeting, if you give them a colored strip of paper, only to the people who can vote, who at registration, you check their membership date, you'll know then not only how many people can be will be voting, but who your authorized people are to get ballots. That's a great question, Matthew. Okay. So I did not hear any objections to us undertaking our special orders, which is the election. I'm going to call on our secretary, Matthew, to pretend to read the section of the bylaws that have to do with elections.
I just finished.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Matthew. The secretary has read the section of the bylaws pertaining to elections. All right. Lawrence Claremont is our nominating committee chair. Lawrence, do you have a slate to share with us?
Yes, Madam President, we do. The nominating committee met on November 6th with all members present. The committee acted in accordance with the bylaws and followed the guidelines set forth, for the nominating committee. The following names were placed in nominations to serve as officers for Road to Success PTA for the 2023-2024 term. President, Lindsay Barnes. Vice President, Claudia Cristiani. Hopefully I got that right. Secretary, Antoinette Bailey. And Treasurer, Allison Savanen. That is our report.
Thank you very much. The slate of officers has been read by the chair of the nominating committee. I will now open the floor for nominations. Are there any nominations for the office of president? Oh, Karen, thanks for raising your hand. Are you nominating yourself or someone else?
She's muted. She's nominating
No.
me.
Karen, you're muted. We know you're. She says, "I know." Oh,
She's
you can't
accepting
talk.
her nomination.
Okay. All right. Karen can't join us right this second. Let's see who else Melanie Gamble.
Oh,
Are you nominated?
I got it.
Okay.
Oh, speaking of, that's exactly who I was going to nominate. Melanie
Excellent.
Campbell.
Gamble. Okay, Melanie,
Campbell, yes, from Escambia. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Karen. Melanie, do you accept that nomination? She may have stepped away.
Oh,
We're going to assume that Melanie declined the nomination. Are there any other nominations for the office of president?
Madam President,
Yes,
I would
ma'am.
like to nominate Crystal Hayes.
Awesome. Thank you. Crystal, do you accept that nomination?
Not at this time.
Thank you, Crystal. Crystal has declined the nomination. Last
Madam
call.
President,
Yes, Alvin.
I nominate Matthew Maychuk.
All right, I'll take it. I'm on it.
All right, Matthew, you've accepted the nomination. You'll be added to the list of candidates for president. Hi, Katie. Would you like to nominate yourself or someone else? You're on mute, Katie.
I was going to nominate Matthew. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other nominations before I close nominations for the office of president? Thank you. Nominations for the office of president are closed. The floor is now open for nominations for the office of vice president. Are there any nominations? Anyone?
I have a question there.
Sure.
We nominate all the way through, or we vote on the first one and then roll down?
Nominate all the way through.
Okay, thank you.
Any nominations for the office of vice president?
Madam President,
Yes, Alvin.
I'd like to nominate Kenosha Bailey.
Thank you. Ms. Bailey, are you willing to accept the nomination for the office of vice president?
I accept.
I think there's a little mix up there. Antoinette versus Kenosha. Which one were you nominating, Alvin?
Kenosha.
Okay. All right, Antoinette, I'm going to come back to you because it sounds like you're willing to run for vice president. Ms. Kenosha, are you willing to run for vice president?
I decline. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'm back to you, Antoinette, my city neighbor. Are you self-nominating?
Yes.
Thank you. Our secretary will call the self-nomination of Antoinette Bailey. Are there any other nominations for the office of vice president? Nominations for the office of vice president are closed. Okay, the floor is now open for nominations for the office of secretary.
I nominate Mary Reeves.
Mary, do you accept the nomination?
Yes.
Awesome, thank you. Are there any other nominations for the office of secretary? Any other nominations for the office of secretary? All righty. Nominations for the office of secretary are closed. Our last position, for which we will take nominations from the floor this evening, is the office of treasurer. Are there any nominations for the office of treasurer?
I nominate Alvin Gainey.
Thank you, Matthew. Alvin, do you accept the nomination?
I'm the Willsworth candidate, but why not?
All right, thank you. Are there any other nominations for the office of treasurer?
Actually, I am the head tailor, so I'm going to decline my nomination. Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you, Alvin. Karen Mazzola.
I nominate Claudia Christiani.
All right. Claudia, will you accept the nomination for our imaginary PTA?
I decline, thank you.
Thank you.
Vice President.
I'm sorry, Alvin?
Claudia is actually slated for Vice President.
All right, perfect teachable moment. Does that preclude her from being nominated for treasurer?
No. Oh.
It does not. You may be nominated for more than one role. And if you win both of those roles, you get to select which one you wish to serve in.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yes. Okay, last call. Any nominees for the position of treasurer?
I'd like to nominate Felita Tutt.
Wonderful. Felita, are you willing to accept the nomination?
Sure.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, nominations for all offices are now closed. Will the secretary please read back the list of nominees?
I didn't have the slate written down. I just took the nominees, but so Melanie Gamble declined. Crystal
No,
Hayes has
we-
declined. Oh, sorry.
What you would do is we'll ask Lawrence to tell us who the slate is again.
Oh.
And you would not list the people who declined, only those people who accepted and are running.
Okay.
Mhm.
Should I let Lawrence read the slate now, or that's after?
Lawrence, who was nominated for president?
For President, Lindsay Barnes.
Okay, and other nominees for president, Matthew?
The only other nominee was Matthew Maychuk.
Okay, thank you. We have two nominees for the office of president. For the office of vice president, Lawrence,
Slated is Claudia Cristiani.
okay. And who else
And
from the floor?
Nominated was Antoinette. I didn't catch the last name when it was set off.
Bailey,
Bailey.
okay, thank you. The office of secretary, Lawrence,
Secretary.
Slated for secretary is Antoinette Bailey.
Mhm. Okay, so Antoinette is running for two offices. And who else, Matthew?
Nominated for secretary was Mary Reeves.
Okay, thank you. And finally, for treasurer, Lawrence,
Slated for treasurer is Allison Savannah.
okay, and Matthew?
There were no additional nominations for treasurer.
This is perfect. So we have one candidate who is slated for two offices, and as we said, yes, Alvin,
Correction, Felita Tut accepted the nomination for treasurer from the floor.
okay, thank you, Felita Tut. All right. So in the case of the candidate who is nominated for two offices, that person can run for two positions. And whichever position they win, that is the role that they are elected to. In the event that they are the person with the largest number of votes in both roles, they actually get to select which role they will serve in. If there is but one person nominated for any office, that is when we take a voice vote ahead of the ballot votes. So in the case of, let's say, our treasurer, if there was but one person, at this point, we would take a voice vote, and that is a vote that everybody just says yay or nay. And whenever you have a voice vote, do not neglect to ask for the no votes as well. You do not record the number of votes. You simply say the yays have it or the nays have it, and that's what's recorded in the minutes. That's what the president will say. So in this case, we have multiple candidates for each position. At this point, the tellers will have received the ballots from the president, and they will look for those people who have those colored strip of papers so that they know who is entitled to have a ballot. The credentials person or the person who worked registration will know how many people should actually be voting. The tellers will need that information when they count, because if they have only 35 people who should be voting, but they end up with 55 ballots, something's wrong there. So whoever's doing registration will count the number of people who are eligible to vote and make sure that they provide that information to the president, so the president can announce the number of people who are eligible to vote, and the tellers will know the maximum number of ballots that they should have. So the tellers know who the people are based on the colored strip of papers. They pass out the ballots. You all pretend that you have received your ballot. When you get your ballot and you have written down your candidates of choice for each office, fold your ballot in half twice, and then hold your ballot up in the air so that the tellers can come and pick it up. And the tellers are walking around picking up your ballots. All right, and then the tellers will retire to the predetermined place that the president has assigned for them to go and count votes. The president then continues wherever you stopped at the meeting. You continue with the meeting as the agenda has outlined. It may be reports or whatever is next on your agenda. And then the tellers, the head tellers and all of the tellers come back. Do you have a report, Mr. Gainey?
I do, Madam President. Lindsay, for the office of president, well, I'm sorry, Madam President. There were 15 eligible voters for this election. There were 13 ballots returned, 13 votes cast. For the office of president, Lindsay received 3 votes. Matthew received 7 votes. For the office of vice president, Claudia received 6 votes. Antoinette received 7 votes. For the office of recording secretary, Antoinette received 9 votes and Mary received 2 votes. For the office of treasurer, Allison received 9 votes. Felita received 1 vote.
Thank you. And then the head teller passes that report to the president, who then reads the same report again in order to enter it into the record. And the secretary is recording the number of votes that each person received. It's unlike the voice vote. In this case, the exact number of votes received by each person is recorded. In the case of Antoinette, prior to declaring any of the offices filled, I would turn to Antoinette and say, Miss Bailey, you prevailed in 2 positions. Which of those positions will you assume? And Antoinette would say, I would rather be vice president. Thank you. So that leaves a hole in the office of, was it secretary?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so a couple of things could happen there. The other person could be declared the winner because they came in second and they were the other candidate. Or we've seen everything happen. Somebody says, well, I want to run now too. We've seen that. We've heard about it. Would it be appropriate? I'm going to ask this question of you all. Would it be appropriate to now have another election for secretary? I see some heads nodding. I see some puzzled looks.
There's a thumbs up.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, Alvin and Lawrence?
I believe it's probably best that we reballot for the office of recording secretary.
That is absolutely right. We would have another election for the office of recording secretary. All right, and I see a hand, Felita, and then Karen. Felita, you still there?
Matthew.
Yes, Madam, for recount.
I'm sorry?
Can you hear me?
Is that you, Felita?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Okay. What did you say there? Did anyone hear what Felita said? Okay.
I think
I
she's
thought she said she wanted a recount.
Okay, of the 13
Last
votes.
thing I heard was a recount.
Okay, you're coming in a little bit wonky, Felita, but some of the members of the audience are saying that you are asking for a recount. So we could do that, but there were only 13 votes out of the 15 eligible voters. So I don't think that it would be prudent to ask the tellers to go back in to count again. But thank you. Karen?
To follow up on her question,
Mhm.
is that the decision of the chair, or is that in the form of a motion where the body decides whether or not a recount is appropriate?
That's a very good question, Karen. I think in this particular case, due to the small number of votes, that it would, again, it would be a decision of the chair that it would not be prudent to count 13 votes again. If there were a lot of voters, say you're at a local unit that thankfully has 50, 100 voters and people have turned out like crazy, perhaps a recount would be appropriate, but not when you have votes that are in the teens.
Okay, so now if I may, Madam President, go to my question,
Sure.
which was, I didn't hear you say that the teller showed the president or the person residing over the meeting the teller's report first, but that the teller announced their report on the record.
It's
Is
a little
that
bit
accurate?
it's a little different at a local unit.
And
Local
why
unit
is that?
simply because it's a different situation. It's not a state, it's not a national, it's simply different.
Under Robert's Rules of Order?
Under past practice.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so, but that's a good question, Karen. Very good question. So the head teller has come in, been called on, read the report. Miss Bailey, who prevailed in 2 elections, chose the position that she wanted to have. That left the secretary's position with only 1 candidate standing. That candidate requested a recount of the 13 votes, which 3 people, our tellers committee was 3 people, had previously counted. The chair said it would not be prudent to recount 13 votes. So we are going to reballot for the position of secretary. So the same tellers would pass out ballots again to the voters who have their delegate cards, and they go back in, and I open the floor again for people to run for secretary. All new, we're starting again. If the person who didn't prevail, that would be Felita, wished to either self-nominate or someone renominated her, she could run again, or anyone else who chose to run for that position could run. It may be someone who did not prevail in one of the other offices who chooses to run, but everyone is eligible to run. The votes are counted again, the head teller comes back, provides that report, and gives the report to the president, who announces the results of the election. At that point, the president will then say, you have elected XYZ as president. You have elected ABC as vice president. You've elected DEF as secretary and GHI as treasurer. Those people will assume their roles at the end of the school year. And then once again, we pick up with the meeting where we had stopped in our agenda. All right. So questions about hosting an election? We have 1 question in the
Madam
chat.
President, before you adjourn your meeting, I
Oh,
move to destroy the ballots.
thank you, Alvin. If there is no objection, the ballots will be destroyed. Pause, look around, see if there's anyone objecting. There's no objection, the ballots will be destroyed. What happens if someone says, I object? Who would do that? But what happens if someone says, I object? Then you have to have a
location.
no, then you have to have a vote, because, or we make that person take them home. No, I'm just kidding. Then you have to have a vote about destroying the ballot. So it's not prudent to say, I object. But guess what? The person who did not prevail, Felita, may very well say, I object. So then there is a vote. All those in favor of destroying the ballots, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
Division.
Okay. Exactly. Only 1 person spoke up and said aye. 1 person spoke up and said no. And division means that there is some concern about the vote. Elvis just giving you all sorts of parliamentary lessons tonight. All right, so division means that a person in the audience can call for division, or if you attended leadership convention, at one point there was a voice vote and I said, the chair is uncertain, we will take a counted vote. So in this case, I'm going to take a standing vote. All those in favor of destroying the ballots, please stand up. And then that way it is a visual for the president to see. Thank you. Please be seated. All those opposed to destroying the ballots, please stand. In this case, it's only a couple of people that stand up. So the ayes have it, the ballots will be destroyed. All right. So I have a question in the chat that came up a little while ago, and then I'm going to call on you, Matthew. So Mary Reeves asked, I said, good evening, everyone, first of all. How is this process handled in a hybrid meeting? Okay, I am going to be perfectly and bluntly honest with you all. Hybrid meetings are from the devil. They are horrible. It is impossible. It is not impossible, but it is extremely difficult to host something that involves debate or voting in a hybrid meeting. It is difficult to do that. I highly recommend that your meeting, election meetings, be all one platform. All one platform. You either meet in person or you meet via Zoom or whatever platform that you use. It is extremely difficult. Can it be done? Absolutely. It takes a very good script in order to do that. It takes a very tech-savvy person working with you in order to do that. It will take some pre-planning in order to make sure that you have a ballot and that your polls, a ballot that's in a poll, and that your polls are anonymous, that you do not see who is voting for whom. So Mary, it can be done. You would need a heck of a script in order to do that. Okay. One other thing that I needed to mention that just slipped right out of my head about the meetings. It'll come back to me. Matthew.
So actually, this plays off something Karen said earlier. She presumed parliamentary process and Robert's Rules of Order at a local level. While recommended, is there an enforced policy regarding that?
Which particular part?
We'll start with Robert's Rules of Order.
Robert's Rules of Order is the parliamentary authority for all PTAs. Okay. It comes into play where your bylaws are silent.
Okay, okay.
So if your bylaws don't say anything about X, Y, and Z, then you would refer to Roberts.
Okay.
Okay. Other questions? Did everybody feel a little bit more comfortable about hosting an election?
Yeah, this was extremely helpful. Absolutely.
Wonderful. Alvin?
Yes. So as you mentioned before, you're like, hey, I was giving out a bunch of free parliamentary examples tonight. You know, and this is not necessarily by design, but these type things can and will pop up during your general meetings. And it is helpful to know how to navigate those things. I was actually really looking forward to something under Karen's question, because of course, you know, I'd love to challenge the chair. So that's something for another meeting, but it gets really exciting. But yes, thank you guys for participating in the way that you did, because it actually made this a very real experience.
So let's go back to that. Okay, we're going to use that example because members have rights. Members also have responsibilities, which they should exercise as well, but members have rights. So we're going to go back to Karen's example. All right. Karen, you said, when I said that it wouldn't be prudent to recount the ballots since there were 3 people counting 13 ballots. Alvin, we're going to pretend you're Karen. What could you have said?
Madam President.
Yes, Alvin.
I challenge the ruling of the chair and I move to have the ballots recounted.
Thank you, Alvin. The question on the floor is the recounting of the ballots. that point, I put Alvin's motion on the floor and the membership decides. All those in favor of recounting the 13 ballots that were counted by 3 people, please say aye.
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 Thank you. All of those opposed, please say no.
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 The noes have it. The ballots will not be
No.
recounted. So that is challenging the chair, and the chair should take no offense because members do have rights. And then the membership decides. Thank you for that example, Alvin.
Cry me a river, Karen.
I am very glad. I'm seeing lots of notes that everybody thought this was helpful, and that's why we're here. And thank you, as Alvin said, for leaning in and being a part of our madness. I'm going to turn it back over to Lawrence.
All right, so I guess we're going to close this bad boy out. Just wanted to say thank you to everybody for joining us tonight, and I hope you guys will walk away with a lot, but also share the information that you learned tonight. This presentation will be posted on the PTA website. If you go there, just type in Road to Success, it will take you there. So anytime you can go just to review or give the link to others to go in and see the convention, LegCon, as well as the Centennial Celebration. And in closing, I just want to say, I know that as volunteers, we give a lot of time to what we do because we're passionate about volunteering, for PTA. So I just want to thank you for your service to your school community. Until that, we'll see you next week and have a good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you so much.
Bye,
I'm going to update
everyone.
my
Thank
Facebook
you.
with president of Road to Success, just saying that. Doing it.
Next week, we'll actually be talking about bylaws. Join us.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank
All right.
you.
Good night,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Bye.
Good night,
Bye.
everyone.
Good evening.
Good night.
Bye-bye. Someone's little one, are you done?